Hi, everybody. I'm so super excited to have another one of our mamas share a celebration this week. This is our second one that we've had just this week. And so we just always love when we have the opportunity to tell a real story about a real family and their experience in the program. So today I have with me Kristine, and I'm going to introduce her in just a second, but we're going to talk about her 13-year-old daughter, Kendall, and kind of her journey throughout this process and kind of how things have changed for her in the positive. So, good morning, Kristine. Thanks so much for being here.
Good morning.
Um, would you mind just telling us a little bit about your journey with Kendall before? So, like, when did you find out that she had some struggles with reading? What did that look like? How long or what happened before we met?
I would say that, I knew that she was struggling with reading even back in kindergarten because I had an older son and she was not progressing as quickly as he did with reading in general. By the time she got in second grade, the teacher was concerned, not overly concerned, but hey, let's kind of see how this goes. And then by the time we got into third grade, that seemed to really be the year that she struggled and started to get way behind her peers. And during third grade, we did lots of intervention with her, and she was able to kind of get back on track. And then in fourth grade, she was officially diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. So she's got a great combo working for her on trying to work through, some of these, I guess, just issues as she's moving through school. And then, you know, throughout the year, she's had interventions. I would say that they were not particularly helpful for her. And I think when she entered the program, she was probably, an average reader. But for me, I think I didn't want to see her struggle as much as she did, maybe with new words or sounding out words. And I wanted reading to be more fun, right? Because it seemed like it was always a chore, regardless of, how much time and effort she put into it. It was always a chore. And that's what I was hoping to get out of the program, was to really, have and make reading more enjoyable for her and not be, a chore. So that's kind of how we ended up. Saw the program and it sounded super interesting. I have, I'm an engineer, so science really appeals to me. Data really appeals to me. And so, I thought I would give it a try.
That's awesome. So, gosh, Kristine, there's like 100 questions that I want to ask
Yeah, okay.
you. But like, I'll just go back to one of them, which I think happens a lot for people. So, in that period of, kindergarten, when you kind of had suspected that there might be some things going on up until third grade, or fourth grade, actually, when you said that you got the diagnosis, tell me some more about some of the stories that either other people were telling you or that you were kind of telling yourself before you got to the point of like, yep, we're going to really dig in and start doing some intervention? Or were they kind of doing some intervention early on, or what did that look like?
I would say that, I mean, they were doing some intervention. So they were pulling her out, I guess for 30 minutes while other kids did other activities, to go work with a reading specialist. And I think just the more repetition helped, but it didn't, there always seemed to be a gap with, what she was trying to accomplish and what was actually happening. And clearly it was the phonemic awareness, right? Now that I've been through the program, and that she just didn't have she tried really hard, but she just couldn't connect all the dots because, they were, some of it was reading just grade level or slightly below grade level books, but then a lot of time they spent time on a computer program that I didn't think was particularly helpful. And so then, it's like, well, she probably could have benefited probably from just being in class and doing what everybody else was doing rather than that particular intervention.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's important to bring up because a lot of people have the misconception or they're told that, well, things will just kind of resolve or, they'll grow out of it. It's really not that big of a deal, especially if their behavior in the classroom is good, right? So
Yeah.
she's a compliant child, she's really kind, and so the behaviors look okay. Therefore, it's really not that big of a deal. But in truth, it could have been so much easier and so much better, and we could have had far less struggle had we been really able to get to the root causes way back then. But, not everybody knows at that time that that's really what you're dealing with. And so I think that that's just important to highlight. So, one of the other things that you
Well, and
said is
I would
like,
say
yeah,
the
go
other
ahead,
thing,
please.
yeah, I didn't want to cut you off, but I think it's, hard as a parent in that situation.
For sure.
Our son had not struggled with anything, and then you have one that struggles, you really don't know what to do. I
Absolutely.
mean, as a parent, you advocate for them, but at the end of the day,
Yep.
there's nobody who's really one-on-one looking out for your child except you. And
Yep.
so in a public school system, which that's where she goes to public school, I mean they had the interventions, but it wasn't necessarily an individualized plan for
Yep.
her. It was kind of what everybody else was doing, and
Yep.
hopefully that was going to work. And
Yeah.
that did not work. That did not get her on grade level.
Yeah, and I appreciate everything that you're saying, Christine, and thank you for adding that because that brings me to like my next question for you. So you mentioned like, yep, I'm an engineer and I'm also the person that cares the most about her success. Like I do have the energy to make this all about her and I do have the capacity to care. Not saying that anybody else in her life didn't care because of course they did. However, it's a different level because you get to
Yes.
see it at home. You get to see her future. You get to see all of those things on a constant basis. And so you're invested in an entirely different way than anybody else. And so, tell me more about the fact that, yep, I don't have a background in education and I've never, like, and I think that can be intimidating for people, right? So, how would you say that it was for you not having a background in education to kind of march through the program and get, so just so people know, you got her from the 30th percentile to the 94th percentile on the wide range achievement test 5. So how did you feel like that went and why do you feel like you were successful?
I think that the program is really easy to follow. That's the first thing, right? So it's in modules, which helps, start off the foundation from kind of the lowest common denominator to, things where we're getting way more specific with sounds and, spelling patterns and et cetera, right? So I think that's really helpful. I think yeah, I would say that I was probably pretty intimidated at first, right? My patience, there's a reason why I'm not a teacher. I'll be honest. My mom's a teacher, and that this is like I'm not sure, but breaking it down into those specific modules with the videos are great. They tell you exactly what's going on, and then the weekly sessions. If you have any questions, you're always there to support, right? And then if we need to reframe or kind of redo some of the things that we've been working on with a slightly different technique, then you can provide that. So, after a few weeks, I felt really confident about, what I needed to do, how I could do it. And then if I had questions, I would ask you, right? And so that worked out great.
Yeah. So I mean, and I do want to celebrate the way that you always showed up because I don't think I can think of a time when you didn't come on and have a celebration about something that was going really well for Kendall. And I think your attitude toward her and her progress really, really mattered. And so talk to me more about what it's like to have a teen like right right in those early teen years and because it can be a challenge, right? So how did you work with her and
Yeah.
set up an environment that made it possible to be working on something that is arguably was hard for her and then feel like you were progressing and successful in all of those things? Like how did you do that?
I would say that probably the two things were specifically around planning and compromising, right?
Okay.
With a teen, they're, you know, she's, you know, she's 13 and she has her own attitude. And sometimes the attitude is more positive and sometimes it's more negative. So sometimes you have to understand what you're working with. That's the
Yep.
first thing. But some of the techniques I used, and we've talked about it before, we're very busy. And so if we knew the day before that we were not going to have time in the evening, we set aside time in the morning and woke up 15 minutes early so that we could get our session in. Because if we waited till, oh, do we have time today? We would have run out of time, right?
Yep.
So that was one thing. And then I think reading Kendall, sometimes she was a lot more energized to do it than others, right? So sometimes, if it wasn't going particularly well, we'd stop after 5 minutes and said, well,
Yep.
let's pick this up tomorrow, and then
Yep.
we'll do a little extra tomorrow or the next day, right? And so that's where the compromise comes in, right? There's days that she was more tired or, like I said, in a better mood than others. Or, if it was particularly hard, maybe it was the first or second session in that module where she was kind of getting the feel.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit more lenient with what we wanted to accomplish.
Yeah.
But overall, the planning and then kind of reading Kendall and seeing where she was really, I think, the recipe for our success.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think I'm hearing you say, but I think it would be good for other people to know, like, you've prioritized this. So it's not like it was a haphazard thing. Like, I'm hearing you say, well, we made a plan to show up. So tell me more about like how often did you not show up? Like, were you pretty consistent?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we probably worked 5 out of the 7 days, right? There was Wednesdays were usually busy. I was busy in the morning and she was busy in the evening. So we knew usually Wednesdays were out. That was kind of a day off that we picked. And then, maybe one other day during the week we would have off. But then if we did that, then we'd work both Saturday and Sunday.
Awesome.
But if we had made 4 days of the week, we'd take off a weekend day. So it was kind of like, it just depended on the week and what was going on, how we made the schedule. But yeah, that understanding kind of what the whole week was going to bring and which days we were planning to make it happen, have a session, then it was much easier than haphazard, like, what are we doing today?
Yep. Yep. So, I mean, I think this is where it just kind of always blows people's mind. Like, how many years did you spend getting her these kind of results?
Um,
I mean, like
well,
when you were in the
how
program,
long
even
did we
though
work? So
even though you did like 5 to 6 days a week, like
yeah, I mean, we accomplished those results. I think I just looked back. It was probably 15 weeks.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
So
like
I
in the
mean,
grand scheme
yeah,
of her life, like it's just
yeah.
a
No, I mean
small
a
little
blip. It was a
blip
blip.
in
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And I think that since we haven't really dug into her data specifically yet, I think that this would be a good time to do that. But her data is absolutely incredible. So I think one of the biggest hurdles for someone that might be struggling with dyslexia is to get the brain to actually hear and respond to all of the sounds. And so when we did that pre-assessment and we had her, can you hear these sounds? Can you pull this one out? Can you put this back together? I was looking at her score. She had a 28 out of 42. So roughly half of those, maybe a little bit more
Yeah.
than that, were hard and not possible for her. And then when she finished, roughly 15 weeks later, she only had one error out of
Right.
that entire assessment. And so talk to me more about like what it looked like in real time to see those changes and why was that important? Because I think a lot of people have the misconception like that's really not that important that your brain can do that.
Well, and I'll be honest. I mean, I don't. I think I saw the progression
Mhm.
throughout the modules, but it wasn't until I actually gave her that assessment how well she had done in the program,
Mhm.
because I wasn't testing her that way. We were making
Yep.
progress, right, over time. And I could see that, throughout each module, she was making progress and then mastering it and then moving to the next. But, I really, I didn't know until
Yeah.
she took that test, like how well, how much improvement she made
Mhm.
from, day one when we
Mhm.
did the pre-assessment to the
Uh-huh.
exit assessment.
Yeah.
Just how well the program had worked on, that particular, having her hear the sounds and then
Mhm.
take them out.
Mhm.
And I would say that, the first go round, she struggled a lot.
Mhm.
Just, probably even giving me the correct answer I gave her probably maybe a try or two, right? Just to
Yeah.
re-say it and think about it. But on the second one, I mean, she just whizzed right through them. And then she only had one error. And I mean, it was almost going from, getting, half of them correct or slightly over half. And I would say kind of, you know, it being hard for her to going to getting all but one correct. And I mean, it was almost automatic, right? Like she didn't have to think about it. She's like, okay, it's this and that, she could just do it in her brain. Where
Uh-huh.
before, I think she really had to work at it to hear the sounds and then try to take one out and then kind of put it back together. So that was, that was a major improvement. Just
Major.
in
And
the strategy that she had to do it, regardless of whether she got them right or wrong,
yeah.
I saw a huge improvement there.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, and I think one of the things that you mentioned earlier is, the struggle that exists. So when you go from third grade to fourth grade, or, you're in that phase of learning to read and now you're switching into reading to learn, you've got a lot of volume that you're sometimes asked to do, whether that's in writing or it's in reading. And that can be really overwhelming if your process for hearing sounds at the base level is a struggle still. So I think that's where a lot of kids get stuck, is they are still working on a lot of those really fundamental things within the brain. Like, is my brain actually even able to hear this word correctly? Let alone, can I manipulate the sounds in my brain while I'm trying to read and spell? And then, by the way, I've got this huge volume of stuff that I'm being asked to do. So I think that's where a lot of kids really start to feel like they're drowning. And so
Yes.
it's just really incredible to see that within a short period of time, you can actually teach the brain to respond very quickly. And you can really alter the way that she's able to process the language within her brain, which is awesome. So then we use the wide range achievement test 5, which is a norm referenced assessment. It's not something that like we've made up internally, but she had some really, really statistically significant growth. So like you said, she was a decent reader. She was at the 30th percentile when she started. And so I think a lot of people could say, well, she can read, so good enough. But within 15 weeks, she went to the 94th percentile, which means that she's able to decode words better than 94 out of 100 kids her age. So she's been taught how to actually break apart a word. She's been taught how to decode. And sure, now like the next on the horizon can be getting her to do that at a rate that is maybe similar to her peers. And so it's possible that right now it could be accurate, but that she might need to work a little bit on the speed or the rate. And that's okay, because now she can actually read it. Do you know what I mean?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and get it correctly and not have to guess. Or I think sometimes she was trying to utilize the fluency, right? And she would, try to do best at fluency, and then she would not look at the ending of words. She'd jump to the, kind of the next thing, and maybe it was ing and she said ed, or I mean, and she just kind of would fill in her own ending to some of the words, and it was like, well, that was close but not exactly right.
Yeah.
And so now I think, especially with the roar, that was super helpful to then make sure that we are reading all the words all the way
Yep.
to the end before we
Yep.
went to the next word. So
Oh, that's awesome. And I want to give her props for her spelling progress too. So she went from the 5th percentile to the 14th, which
yeah.
statistically is significant. In addition, she had so many that were like, if she knew the pattern that it followed, because English has got some tricky patterns, right? So there's, 6 different ways that you can do the long A. And so she had the long A in, a lot of these situations, but she maybe picked the wrong pattern in that instance. But had she known some of those a little bit more, she would have been up, in the mid
Yeah,
30s to 40s in her percentile.
right.
So she made some really significant progress there too, as well. Like, how would you say that has she grown in her confidence, or what has that looked like?
She has, I think, before she used to always ask me to spell everything, like we were making a list, and now she's doing that on her own, right? And then if it's something important, I'll tell her, well, you spell it to me and I'll tell you if it's right
Yeah.
versus the other way around, right? And
Yeah.
now she's doing that. And most of the time she's spelling it correctly. So that, I mean, that's really a great win. Yes, she does. I think she can make some progress there. But like you said on the test, in the pre-assessment, she was not accounting for all of the syllables even, right? So whether they were, right or wrong, she was missing pieces of the word. And on this one, I felt like she at least had all of the syllables,
Yep.
in the word,
Yep. And
and
she
was
had the
able to,
sounds
yeah,
too. I
she
mean,
had
like,
a lot of the sounds correct. It was just really, now it's kind of the spelling pattern. So if you were spelling it phonetically, she got it right.
yep,
If
that's
you're
right.
spelling by pattern, she has some room for growth.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that that's just real for people to understand that yes, you make significant growth, and that's the point here, is that you're looking to move from this place where you're on the hamster wheel and you feel like, oh my goodness, we keep doing the same thing over and over again, but we're not moving, and we're
Yeah.
not moving nearly as far or as fast as we could or should be, given where we really want to go. Because, I mean, like, these are brilliant children who have a lot of incredible gifts in the way that their brain processes other things. And so these
Yes.
are kids that have a lot to give. And to put them in a position where they can actually give to the level that they're capable of, I think is the real goal here. But
That's right.
just in looking at some of the words that she spelled phonetically, I mean, like, executive, compromise, appropriate, lucidity, enthusiasm. I mean, these are not
Yeah,
little words like
no,
cut and
no,
bust, like she would
no,
have had those
yeah,
no problem. But we're
yeah,
talking about very complex multisyllabic words, and
yes,
we're not skipping the syllables. We've got all
yeah,
of the sounds there. And so yeah, we've
yeah,
got a little bit of work to figure out some of those patterns so that they're exact all of the time, but some really incredible progress.
yes,
So
yes.
Kristine, if you were to say like some of your biggest celebrations for Kendall, what would you say you're like the most happy about for her?
Well, definitely the confidence,
Yeah.
and for the first time, I think, in probably forever, and part of it was that she is in a reading slash English class, and her teacher decided to move on to a different profession and left just a week ago.
Oh,
And she handed out books to all the kids. And Kendall actually was reading the book, which is, she
wow.
never sits down to read, right? So that's great. I mean, I think that in itself,
Mhm.
I hadn't seen that yet. And so now that she's got this book that one of her favorite teachers provided to her, she's ready to read. And I think we're going to decide that we're probably going to read that together. So maybe we'll trade off paragraphs or something, and that's something we can kind of keep going as our sessions. And I think she'll love that. So, and I think the other achievement is we finished, right? We
Yeah,
made it to the end. I mean, I think that's a big accomplishment,
it's a
just
huge
getting to the
accomplishment.
end and getting the results that she did. I mean, she put a lot of work into it. I
Yep.
think, as a 13-year-old, she probably didn't appreciate the journey as much as I did. But you know, uh, those are probably the two biggest things.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and I think it's so powerful to see that it really does have the capacity to change in a short window. So again, like a blip in time, and she's got massively different skills now. And so whether it's her ability to hear the words in the language, or to manipulate those in her head, or to be able to decode on her own, or to be able to spell by sound all the time, like those are big wins that
Mhm.
are a totally different skill level than what she had just a couple of months ago. So I think that that's something that absolutely deserves to be celebrated. And I also want to give you credit for the way that you made that environment. So I mean, yes, we give you the tools to use, but like you get to make that your own and to say, okay, great, this is me and my child, and we're going to make this work for us. And so, did you guys have any kind of special agreements, or like when you first started? Were you both pretty clear on what you wanted and your goals, or did you feel like you had to do a little coercion? Like, did you get her on board eventually? How did that look?
Yeah, I mean, she's per, pretty easygoing about this stuff. She knows that, that she has to work harder than other students to make it happen. So I said, here's something that I think that will really benefit you. And, she was on board. I think up front from a mindset perspective, I went in like, can we go in like at least with neutral, not negative and not necessarily positive, but that we're going to give it a try and we're going to make progress and we're going to kind of see where it goes. Because I didn't feel as a 13-year-old I could cram down like this is going to be wonderful and it's going to be awesome. And after 2 weeks we're
Yep.
you're going to be a brain surgeon, right? That
Yep.
wasn't that wasn't the technique I used. And I did get a technique from another parent, right? Some motivation, like, so if we made it through all of our sessions for the week, then she got to pick something, that I ordered on Amazon, something small, but that, she could have, right? And then, so that was like, okay. And then she got looked forward to, getting through the sessions and then getting her motivation gift, right?
Yep.
And so, those, and I would say that sometimes I was also, I use the word compromise. I compromise on where we actually do the session. Sometimes
Sure.
she wanted to do it in her bed, right?
Okay.
Because she was like, if that's okay, I don't want to lose, that's not a
Yep.
battle I want to face today. It was like, okay, sure, we can,
Yep.
or we can do it in your room, on the floor, wherever you're, but I did make sure that she was paying attention and, that she was working, but sometimes, and then a lot of times we did it at our work desk, right? And
Yep.
that was most appropriate. But sometimes I would,
Yep.
on a Saturday afternoon, she's like, well, can we just do it here? And sure. Okay. So those are some of, again, the compromises that I made.
Yeah, and I think what's really also powerful about what you're saying is you know her and you know what's going to work for her. And like what works for Kendall may not work for
Yeah,
some other child,
sure.
but
That's
because
right.
you know that relationship,
Yeah, yeah,
her motivations, then you can kind of tailor that better than, maybe
yeah,
somebody else could. So that's awesome.
absolutely.
Yay. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on to share your experiences and just
Yes.
your super wins that you had made over the last few weeks with her. And I want to, because I think the most important message that I want to get out is that sometimes when you are looking at a child that is 13 or greater, 12 or greater, 11 or greater, sometimes people will say, oh, well, we're going to focus instead on adaptive technology. We're just going to teach this child how to use speech to text,
Yeah.
or we're going to, kind of push the accommodation route because there's really nothing that we can do. If we've intervened with this child already, and this child has already had X amount of years of intervention, how could we believe that there's going to be a different result? And so I think that's the most powerful message that I want to share. And through your like real life experience, it really doesn't have to stay that way. So, yes, you can be 13 and yes, you can make that much progress, even though you may have done other things before that didn't serve you, that didn't get to the root cause. And so, when you do repair that root cause and you help the brain to actually hear and respond to these things, you can make massive growth, even though you might have this mindset that like it's not possible. So anything else that you want to add to that, like from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we were kind of there being in eighth grade. I mean, she still has some interventions, but at the end of the day, I knew that she was going to need another boost. And I thought this would be a great boost for her. And I do see her now. There's, on your phone and, your iPad. I mean, that they can fill in the words for you, right?
Yep.
But you still need to know what that word is and its meaning and whether you're picking the right one. And so I think having her be more confident with that and not having to rely on that as much is definitely a win as well. So yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, a lot of times I think if people think that if they're 13 and they can't spell, they're never going to be able to spell. And I don't think that's the case at all, right?
Me neither.
We like I said, we still have some opportunities there, but she's
Yep.
at least got the skills now
Right.
to work on it and make it better
Yep.
than she had before. She didn't have those skills at all.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, as we close out, I also wanted to thank you. I mean, this has been an amazing journey,
Thank you.
mostly and partly because of you. You know, you have such wonderful skills working with people and such a wonderful program. So, thanks so much for being in our lives.
Oh,
It's been awesome.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, well, Kristine, thank you very, very much
Yes.
for your story and sharing. And I'm sure that there are at least dozens of others who have a child that is also in the same spot and probably feeling like, there's nothing that we can do, that I know that you will inspire and give hope to. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.